off the bat, how many of you have specific questions? No specific questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. So I'm just going to then do a review of where we've gone. Yes, Pam?
I did have one question from watching one last night.
Oh, okay. What is it?
It had to do with the 4 perceptions, and that one starts with wonder.
Yes.
And I totally understand that and totally can appreciate the value of it. But when I think about someone who's out of balance, to come to wonder is already a transition. So, how does one actually get to wonder if you're
Okay.
Great.
out of whack?
All right.
You get your rarity.
There's, I'm going to mute everybody for a second. One of the things, Pam, is people who are already in that level of chaos, they're not even ready to think about equanimity. They really have, they're just not there yet. They're too overwhelmed somatically, psychologically, circumstances. You have to be able to breathe into this before you can even start. So that's my response. And then, and I'm thinking in terms of people having access to the content I'm offering. So they're in a different place, but to work with an individual and help them calm themselves down in a very physical way, whether that's breathing or doing some movement, whatever, to free them from the chaos they're in, then you can start leading them into wonder. You can say, let's wonder at this right now. And then you can share thoughts around what is wonder. And, are there too many pictures here? Do you hear too many dialogues in your head? Let that all go. Go into the deepest part of your soul before there's anything, before there's any thoughts, before there's any stories, before there's any feelings. And it's hard. It's very hard to get there, to conceptualize it. So you have to really open up the doorways to releasing everything. Yes, Melinda, just unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, I'm thinking that, yes, it is a very long journey between crisis and wonder. And as a practitioner that you are, Lynn, and or just wise women that people come to us, it's that very gesture of them reaching out to another that has a little thread of wonder, or a little opening of hope. And so if we focus on that reaching out, I think it's probably the one string that will lead them to wonder eventually.
The other thing that I find really important, which I wasn't really thinking about, is that when you're working with another individual, you have a core that is always in a state of wonder. You're not creating a picture. You have to wonder first. And then through your wonder, you lead them into wonder. It's energetic. And so if I still my energy enough, then I can become a holder of all their stuff and ask questions. Because most people don't want to let go of their stuff. They're so identified with it. So if you energetically hold on to that, and you don't have to tell them that's what you're doing, they'll sense it. They'll sense that you're being a container that's non-judgmental. And then they'll slowly be willing to let go. So, and that can, as a coach or a counselor, that can take a long time for people to trust it, to really begin to say, oh, this person isn't judging. Oh, this person is holding me with wonder. And then they start picking it up. And they can't hold on to it for very long, but they pick it up. I think that's why I'm excited about offering this course, is seeing how many of us with a course on this will find it more within their grasp, to understand, to maintain, to share.
I think I saw Shelley's hand up.
Yes, Shelley, hi. Unmute yourself, please. There you go.
I got an image when we were talking about settling first and then the wonder, but I also have the experience mostly working with toddlers, for one, comes to mind, where they'll be in crisis and very unsettled, and coming from that settled place in myself, like you said, where I could just this past week, just sort of scoop him up, take him outside, look at the trees and the leaves and the wonder, and me being so infused in wonder that, and them being within sort of that etheric field to get that, or that wonder then helps settle and pull them out of crisis. So anyway, I just was seeing the dance of that going both ways, but the essential nature, and really this whole pandemic for me has been a deepening of my settling myself to be of service to whatever comes next, because it's just, and for the people around me or the community, whatever. Anyway, so that was just an interesting.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up. In my course, Inner Mother, Inner Father, the mother is always taming, the father is always naming, to go into these gestures. And the four maternal gestures are to hold, to handle, to present new objects, new perspectives. And the fourth is has this esoteric name, reverie, but it's really when the mother takes the infant's projections, sees the upset, takes on the projections, calms it down, and gives it back to the infant. And that's all energetic. I mean, it can be, oh, you're cold. Let me get this blanket and wrap you up. But the reverie activity is really important. And then the other thing is that we need to realize that when we're in a state of chaos, and this is why the systematizing and categorizing is important. It's taking it back to its original place. So a lot of it is inner child work. Holding that part of you that's in chaos with reverence and wonder. It's maybe what I haven't pointed out is that your whole being doesn't have to go into the state of wonder. The part of you that's self-imagining has to go into a state of wonder. But the part of you that needs to be self-defining maybe doesn't go into wonder. Again, it's what I wrote about, the complexity of us is amazing. So that possibility of bringing self-reverie, bringing that ability to look at the part within you that is suffering, and do it without any question. No, nobody's.
Mhm.
Yeah, does that make sense? Any comments?
I have a comment about that, which is you just used the word part. And I think it's important to recognize, we are parts. Often sometimes, occasionally our whole being is in chaos, like disorganized. We really need help co-regulating. Yes, there it's very hard to wonder because, we need to be held, or we need we need something to breathe, to have maybe somebody else wonder for us. Well, we're not even at that. We have to get ourselves back to some kind of base. But there are I'm sort of thinking of this equanimity as being with not the thing that has the highest trigger, like the highest, it's going to take over our whole being.
Intensity.
Yeah, we'll start small and build the capacity to hold the rest of ourselves with reverence over time. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think you're right on with that. I think it can be overwhelming. I was just sitting here thinking, if I wasn't all parts, which is an earthly experience, it's an incarnation experience, I would be in a state of holy calm. I would be in the moment. I'd be in timeless time. I'd be in unity. There'd be just, and I can imagine it. I couldn't imagine that even 6 months ago, before I started doing all this research.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to really be in the moment, and to call that holy calm is really amazing. I'm going to share my screen right now because I have a graphic I did that, come on, why isn't it centered? Can you all read that? This graphic here?
Yes.
All right. So if we start down at the bottom, we have this experience in space where there's separation, there's weight, it's visible, it's what we see in the mirror. And it's also where we experience physical isolation. So social distancing is really in that realm. And that kind of loneliness is this physical spatial existence. And then we have our life in time, which is our biology and our biography, all that gives us, that contains all our memories and contains all that is healthy and not healthy through biology. And that's all time related. It's time that takes us from birth to death. And these are the earthly experiences, and it's what generates the chaotic reactions.
Mm.
But the chaotic reactions are experienced in consciousness. So the astral body lives in relativity. It is always moving from past to present to future, from earth to spirit. It's dancing all around. It's the dancing body. It's so dynamic. And when it gets dominated by the earthly experience that we carry in our biology and our biography, or what we carry in our spatial existence in our physical bodies, the soul collapses into reactions instead of relationship. And it's this work of building equanimity that lifts us up to the higher self, to the experience that I can name and tame my world. And then in the spiritual world, there is no space, there is no time, there's no story, there's no biology. And consciousness is just, it's all universal, it's all one. And that's that experience of holy calm. When I'm in a state of holy calm, there's no difference between me and you. I'm beyond that. I'm beyond those distinctions. It's equanimity that allows me to relate to you as you and relate to me as me. And in the workshop, we're going to be playing with all of this. We're going to be dancing in these fields of existence and see what we come up with. So does anybody have any questions about this graphic or any observations? I'm sure it could be better, but I wanted to put something together. No? Okay.
Well, I have an observation that it's helpful to see this laid out like this and to see how the chaotic reactions are, where that's placed between the astral and the etheric and physical body. Like that's where they sort of, it's like where water hits, you know, on the ocean or on any body of water, where it hits, there's sort of like a reaction that comes around because of that. Like it ricochets off the water and then it causes all these ripples all the way back to a wave to shore, you know. And quite often there's an undertow also that kind of happens there underneath what we can see. And I think that's what basically that chaotic reactions is talking about, that if we can imagine what happens to flowing water when it hits an immovable object, or it seems immovable, creates all these things.
So Jane, when you're talking about that, one of the archetypes that is always wonderful to work with are the 4 elements of earth, water, air, and fire. So I can ask people, what natural chaos is the most terrifying to you? Is it an earthquake, a volcano? They're earth and fire. And is it a tsunami or a flood? Is it air, you know, a tornado? What throws you into that chaos? What of those archetypes freak you out?
Mm-hmm.
Is it ice? Is it heat? Darkness? You know, what's going on? But this is what throws you into chaos. Anything triggers that in you. You know, just naming, using the archetypes to name it, and then to explore where it all comes from. Like, what animals are you scared of? You know, just an act of naming something like that can begin the journey to equanimity around what is scary, what is terrifying, what is disruptive. I mean, you were talking about, and it's interesting that you were talking about water hitting the shore, and that's really important. But I've been a swimmer all my life. It's air is much more chaotic for me. I mean, I love a breeze. I love, but a windstorm, the idea of a tornado of things swirling around me, that's scary because you can't get away from it. You know, with a wave, there's always a shore. You know, with a flood, there's always higher ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but being blown around. Let's again see, these are metaphors archetypes that allow you to begin to get a handle on equanimity.
I think another thing that I'm reminded of here is that I just listened to a video yesterday. Yeah, it was a video, and the guy was talking about how in presence we're all in unity, like there's a unity. And I hear that from a lot of spiritual teachers about what feels to me to some degree as very possible to sit on the cushion or to be in a state of oneness, or as you have it here, in holy calm. The thing is, though, is that if I'm not prepared to stay on the cushion my whole life, like I'm going to enter into, I mean, I'm incarnating to have an experience with people in connection. Connection is a profound need of mine, and I think a lot of other people. I don't want to collapse or freeze or, or have to flight a conversation because I'm going to be triggered. So to me, it keeps me interested in this process that you're talking about in this workshop and in equanimity, because that allows me to have connection with people. And instead of it being about how to manage my triggers, it's like, how interesting is this trigger that's coming up here? Then I become almost like a, what's it called? Like an explorer, an objective explorer of what's happening in the interchange with somebody. Just like it's interesting. Look at this. Like my heart is beating profound, like really, really fast at the thought of, or because I'm this, or, because the air is moving so rapidly. Isn't that interesting? Instead of me wanting to hide from the air, it's like, well, what is it like to just be here? It's terrifying. That's interesting. And then working through all of these lenses to kind of see the origin of it. Like, to me, that's, and why I'm so excited about this workshop too, is that we get to do that in community. So we don't feel a sense of us being just weird or traumatized or shut down. We can really have genuine tenderness and reverence for each other, because our humanity is like, it's so interesting, our individual species of one. And for me to encounter, say, Shelley's individual species of like her planet of one, and Pam's and Marion's, Jacqueline's, I think it really helps us untangle our own in a, to be able to look at our archetypes in this planet of our ecosystem with more tenderness. Yeah.
Oh, I have to admit people. There we go. And okay, Jacqueline, do you want to be seen? And Marion, do you want to be seen?
And Shelley.
Yeah. Okay, so Shelley is Jack. Okay. All right. Okay, here we go. Now we're getting some people. That's nice. Hello. So welcome. And yeah, we've been having a great discussion and it's starting back up. Anyway, one of the things that I think is important is, and I will be talking about more in the course, but when I was putting equanimity together, was this experience of equanimity as a bridge between two opposing sides. It's equanimity that we're building a bridge. It allows us to bridge. Equanimity allows us to budget. All right, so finding our limits, containing ourselves, the budget experience, then, and that's time and energy. We need to budget time. We need to budget attention. We need to budget energy. And then the rainbow, which is this glorious realm of all the colors of the soul. And equanimity allows, so when dark meets light, a rainbow appears. And so it's that point of equanimity that allows the rainbow to appear. And then in terms of connecting, as Jane was talking, we form a grail. A grail is always formed in community. And that requires this state of equanimity that comes from community to form this grail. In Christianity, it's where two or more are gathered. This grail picture. So equanimity allows us to build bridges. It allows us to budget and maintain wellness. It allows us to find the rainbow out of this struggle between light and dark. And I can remember, as a story to share, some point in my 30s where I was always running from the dark to the light. I never let them meet. It was black or white. And at some point, I don't know if I was at a workshop or whatever, it just hit me that I had grown up in a family that was filled with storm clouds. It was always gray. There was never any sunshine. And so I had assumed that life was dark or light. There was nothing in between. And I married a man who, if I was in agreement, I was in the light. And if I was being myself and disagreeing, I was cast into darkness in the relationship. And one day I realized about the beauty of conversation, the beauty of meeting differences of light and dark created the rainbow. And I wanted to live in the rainbow. And that was a huge breakthrough for me. And then this notion of the grail, of having a sacred conversation. And when I work with my clients, it's so amazing when we've come to know each other well enough that a grail is always being formed and something beyond us, beyond the conversation we're having, enters in and transforms everything. There are new insights. It's incredible. So those are all gifts of equanimity. So is that making sense? Is that bringing up any questions in any of you?
I wonder if that's a gift of.
Hold on, Jane. Melinda raised her hand. So
Okay.
unmute, Melinda.
Yes, I just find it fascinating that I'm assuming that this shift happened for you, Lynn, with your imagination, your rational mind, and your intuition and your creativity. And I'm just wondering how one pierces this wall between, or this distance between the chaos and the equanimity, without engaging the body. And I'm not, it's just amazing that you were able to do that, unless you did engage the body in a way you did not include in your narrative just now.
All right. So engaging my somatic consciousness, or engaging movement, or what do you?
Movement. Well, I don't know. Somatic consciousness, what is that? I'm not sure. Maybe you can help
Well,
me.
the bodily sensation.
Okay.
All right. So where was I sensing that? What happened? And I mean, it's a good question. And one, I'd done a lot of work. You know, being in my body was never safe for me. Being a victim of sexual abuse in my early childhood, I didn't want to pay attention to my body. It was very painful. So what I did to survive the abuse is I gathered up all my life forces, all of my, I stilled all my biological experiences and took all my life and put it up in my head. So I played dead.
Mhm.
So that's part of my experience. That's why I am able to come alive in my thinking. You know, and it's why I bring so many physiological archetypes into my work with people. It's why I mean, the experience I had of my, and again, this is, you know, it's kind of conceptual, but my vagus nerve, which, you know, has this sympathetic and parasympathetic ability to regulate my body. As soon as I learned about Stephen Porges and his work with the vagus nerve and prosody in the voice. So I just woke up to it. But again, I'm a thinker, so, and I can language things. So that's just part of how I do it. And I've worked with a lot of clients over the years that have found a lot of insight in working that way. As a child, I danced constantly and I sang constantly. And I also was a swimmer. You know, so dancing and swimming are not earth activities. They're water and air. So that anything that I had to, I was pretty good at basketball, but even that, you're always going up. The basket is up high. So anything that made me hit the ground was terrifying. Terrifying. No sense of safety, just utter chaos. And so looking back at that and why I love the fact that I can digest so well in my thinking. All right, it's fertile all the time. I have cognitive intercourse all the time. So, but that was my path. That's my karma. So to bring things down, you know, I was asking a client just yesterday, well, how does your body feel? And so we talked through that. And then what, you know, just not, it feels tense, but what is the emotion and the tension in your body? So, you know, so it's challenging. I hope this is being helpful.
Mhm.
Because the highest human capacity is to think. Our ability to have language, to have imagination, to live in a question that's not about survival, that's not about pleasure and pain, but that's about morality and spirituality. That's extraordinary.
Yes, but we are still human and we have at least four components to us. So I just, wondered. Thank you for sharing.
Does that make sense? No?
Yes.
Okay, good. Good. Jane, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question that Melinda is asking, because I've often had this, for me, coming into closer relationship with my body has really helped my own inner work, because of my own particular, I mean, there's a cultural component to this. There's the patriarchy, there's the collective that we live within. Being never, I don't have any sexual abuse, but I'm living within a culture that separates me from my body. At least that's the way I perceive it. So me having tenderness towards my felt sense, even awareness that I have a felt sense, is really has been vital to do this work. And seeing how the biology, looking through the lens of biology, through the vagus nerve, for example, that's one. But just noticing where some of these things get caught up in my body. Right now, I'm looking at this archetype of envy, which is leading me to betrayal, which is leading me to goodness. And as I'm looking at each of those pictures, what happens in my body is a little bit different. I mean, the gesture or the, so I have a focusing practice too, that I'm really sensing into, like, so where is that particular piece of it in my body? And just holding that with some kind of tenderness. I think it's not a direct line, like, and I was talking to Lynn about this morning, because I'm noticing, Lynn said to me, Jane, naming is different than labeling. And I think quite often, this naming, I'm having a felt sense, and then it's hard for me to bring that up into language that feels right. So I could say to you this, it feels like, ugh. That's not language, right? But you all know in a sense what that's like, and how that's different from, how that's like, that tightness would be different than a stab in the neck or wherever it might be. But it's hard for me to bring that up into language. It maybe wouldn't be hard for Lynn, but for me, it is really hard to bring up into language. It's just a sensation that I could more accurately communicate just by that movement. But hearing Lynn's statement about how the mind, the brain was the refuge, I can see how that developed its capacity in a way that mine didn't. My biography didn't have to develop that capacity in quite the same way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. If we take, if we look at multiple lifetimes, and if we look at each lifetime as a process of initiations, and that some of us experienced real initiations in mystery centers. So to enliven our thinking, to make our thinking organic, is very important. So what happened in other initiations, which we recapitulate our previous lifetimes in our childhoods. So the sexual abuse, what was that recapitulating? What was it to drive me all my life into this safe, here there's all this flesh, it's soft and vulnerable, and the heart is inside. And in the skull, the hardness that protects the brain, which is so extraordinary. It's hard on the outside. And of course, breathing, it's with our ribs, it's hard, soft, which has always been fascinating. But, the old ancient mystery centers were pretty bizarre. And like in the Pythagorean mystery centers, you couldn't speak for 5 years. 5 years of not speaking. And did I have an initiation where I had to be mummy-like? I had to be totally swaddled. I couldn't move anything except my head. I mean, what kind of crazy imaginations can we come up with to understand with real reverence what our lives have been like, what capacities we've built up. And to do that, we have to have equanimity. We can't find meaning if we're too happy or too sad or too frightened or too angry. We have to find this middle ground. And how do we do that? And it's not escape. Equanimity is not escaping chaos. It's entering into chaos, but consciously. And so we struggle. We work to do this. And we find our way. So that's, whoa, it's a lot. And that's why we have our friends along the way. Yeah, so I can, it's interesting. I can pay attention to my own body sensations, but what I've gotten really good at, because I do so much consultation on the phone, so I'm not in the same physical space with my clients, is sensing their body experience. I get, it's clairsentience, that I feel what they're feeling. And that's so cool and so helpful. And I have to still myself so that what movement occurs, what sensation occurs in my body is not mine. And I can only do that because when I'm in a session with a client, I am more likely than not in some level of equanimity, or I couldn't do it. I'd be dealing with my shit all the time. So that's, you know, through the workshop, we're going to be playing with all of this. We're going to be exploring everything together and seeing what, you know, there'll be exercises to do on your own, exercises to do in conversation with some friend who's not in the workshop. And we'll come and we'll work through it all. We'll see what this is like. And you just have to hit the mark 1 or 2 times before, aha, the epiphany comes. And you can always find your way back to that. So that's what we're doing in this program.
So I've been working with you for about 1.5 years, and we've gone through several of these archetypes together and some of the victim perpetrator and different dyads and continuing, you know. And one thing that I've noticed in this process is that like so much of what we do is cognition, you know, where I have blogs and courses and, you know, podcasts and conversation, like just all of it is coming in all the time. But the practice of actually equanimity seems like it's the sort of space, like you're calling it, a bridge between, for me, cognition and practice. Like equanimity sort of springs out of this, like, but at some point I need to bring the cognition into myself and really tease apart what it's like in this ecosystem of mine. What is it like in my body? What is it like in my soul? What is it like, you know, in my etheric body, also like in my life force? Where does it inhibit that? And where does it excite it? Where am I too full? Where am I not full enough? And just looking through all of these different maps, equanimity has sprung up, but it is not a one shot and done. And that's something that I really think is a value, Lynn, with what you're laying out here, because it keeps us in fluidity. This is not like a cognition that stays static. And now we've built the edifice, and this is what envy is, and this is what betrayal is, and this is exactly how it sits in my body. No, actually, it's something that then I can recognize in other situations, in other people, and that gives me another piece of it. Like if I'm to look around the entire tree, this keeps the entire tree fresh. It's not a concretized thing. That's what that is. That's the Democratic Party. That's the Republican Party. It's like, oh, that's like life playing out, triggering me into certain responses. And it keeps the fluidity and movement, I guess, is my point. This whole thing of equanimity, it's not a state that we get to and we stay in. It's a state we go in and out of all the time, isn't it?
Yeah. And, but it's a state we know how to get there.
Yeah.
It's not that every day you're looking at, I mean, it may be at the end of the day and you do your review, you look at, well, where were my moments of equanimity today? And what was the gift that was there? Yeah, and you mentioned the etheric body, and one thing we'll do in the session on time is we'll be looking at the 4 great ethers. So light, warmth, tone, and force, generative force. And those are the things I look for in my body generally. When I'm safe. I mean, I've done some work with Melinda, and in my body sensations, I realized I've had tremendous weakness in my upper arms. I don't trust my upper arms. And I think they were held during the sexual abuse, so that I've always been afraid of my sensation in my upper arms. And I did some work with Melinda, and I really got that I feel those bones are shattered. So that it wasn't so much the muscles as it was the bones. And that was really amazing to get in touch with. And I think I couldn't have gotten in touch with it, even with Melinda's extraordinary support, if I hadn't done so much other work, that prepared me, that gave me a sense of, oh, I can deal with this kind of insight, this process of going into the dark. And I think that's made a huge difference. So we'll see what happens working so actively with equanimity. And what the experience is really like, and how, I mean, we're talking about the body. Everything in our body is the language of the gods. Everything. And we know so little about our physiology, our biology, and we're discovering more. I mean, search on Google for mitochondria. I mean, oh my God, there's so much there. It's getting the language, to understand scientific language, but oh, our bodies are the language of the gods. There is nothing in the universe that's not in us, in our bodies. So again, I'm thinking into my body. I'm letting my body think into me with equanimity. I mean, there was a time where my body hurt so much in so many ways that it was like, oh my God, what on earth is going on? And it's, now I'm just dealing with aging, but my body doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't scream at me to get my attention. So Yeah, it's wonderful. So, and part of that is because I have a right relationship, a growing right relationship to my body, to the language of the gods. So that's part of why in the course I'll be, bringing these archetypes in as the lenses for which we wonder at what we name, what we can organize through systematizing and categorizing all that makes us crazy. So, any more questions? I mean, I'm game. We've been talking for almost an hour now. So I'd like to know if you have any questions about the course, the equanimity workshop, course, questions about chaos or holy calm. No, all right. So have I given you enough to digest, to get a sense of what the workshop will be like? Because we'll be on Zoom every Sunday for 6 weeks. And Wednesdays, I'll be giving you content. Some of it will be content that I present with a video. Some of it will be writing. Some of it will be worksheets, all to juice you up for the conversation, to help you get a sense of your own experience of chaos, your own experience of equanimity, your own connection to these archetypes. And then we jump in and start forming the community, the grail, the great conversation, a conversation that the gods will participate in because we're using their language. So, any thoughts? Everybody ready to say goodbye?
My thought is that it's easier than it sounds. I think that, like entering into, it's like if you told me how to walk and I didn't walk, it would sound like a lot. And I think it's easier once we start delving into it. And the other thing is, I was thinking that we bring a lot of our other practices. I see a somatic experiencer. I'm bringing in that knowledge into my work. You're talking about, your arms with Melinda and discovering that, and what you brought into that work with her, and then what you're bringing into this practice of equanimity. All of us have many practices, yoga or meditation, praying. I mean, we could be chanting, we could do somatic experience, whatever, focusing.
Yeah, and it's not just that. I mean, I'm looking at Pam, and she's this brilliant bookkeeper, and the wisdom of bookkeeping. It's such an archetype that we need. How do we balance the books of our soul? Pam can talk forever about that, even though she doesn't believe it. Yeah, so Jacqueline, what are you wanting here? More in archetypes and bodily reactions, please. But I can't understand. I know you're on your phone and typing in, or you can unmute and just speak your question. Yeah. Let's give her a second. Yeah, so we all bring extraordinary gifts to this conversation.
So I'm a teacher. Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm sorry, I'm on the West Coast, so it's still earlier over here.
All right, good.
You guys are in the middle of the afternoon. Anyways, I'm a teacher, and I don't know, I'd like you to go deeper into the archetypes a little bit. I came on late, so I didn't hear everything, and you asked if we wanted more, so I thought maybe you could just talk a little bit more about them.
So what grade do you teach?
Kindergarten.
Oh, great.
I've been a teacher for 27 years in parent education, primary school, um, substitute teacher, I've done it all.
So you've really
Reading teacher.
and seen a lot in the children and the archetypes. So archetypes are universal. All right. They're expressed in individual variations. All right. And all of us, it's like the four temperaments, the choleric temperament, the sanguine temperament, the phlegmatic, and the melancholic, were a mix. And there's always one area, one temperament that is like a foreign language to us. And we won't understand it. And we always want to be complete. We always want to be a pure expression of the archetypes. And so we search and search and search. And I always get a laugh because I say we marry our missing temperament. And that's the temperament we divorce because it's still not a language we get. And yet, so the choleric, which is connected to fire and the emotion of anger, the sanguine, which is connected to air and the emotion of happiness, the phlegmatic, which is connected to water and fear, and the melancholic, which is connected to earth and sadness. And it's very interesting to look at here's a big archetype. I've just named 3 different sets of archetypes. So the temperaments, the emotions, and the elements. And if you look at your childhood and what was the missing emotion in your childhood, what was not acknowledged? And or with your mother, what was her missing temperament that in you could never, she couldn't nurture that temperament in you? And if you had it, like you get a melancholic mother with a choleric child, it's going to be very hard for that mother to unconditionally love her choleric child because she doesn't have that fire energy in her. So she won't understand it. And it can happen with teachers too, Jacqueline, where a teacher doesn't, should look at where she gets triggered by what of the 4 archetypal emotions trigger her when the children get out of control in it. And waking up to equanimity in that case, which I'm sure after more than 20 years, you've really developed. But understanding these archetypes, it's always, it's the language of the gods. It's universal. You can never go wrong when you look at something through an archetypal lens. And that's what we'll be doing. And we won't go beyond 4 archetypes of 4. We'll be doing archetypes of 3, like in time, frequency, amplitude, and duration. What are our rhythms? How frequent are they? What's the amplitude? How intense? And how long do they last? And it's huge to know yourself, to understand your rhythms of your emotions, of your moods. How often, how frequently, and how intense, and for how long can I bear being in a social situation with a lot of noise and a lot of conversation that doesn't have the deep, heavy meaning? I am a total bore at a party. I can't do it. So we learn things about ourselves, and we see what's going on, and then we can make choices. With equanimity, we can make choices. But I don't have a lot of equanimity in parties. So what we do. You know, it's learning, it's developing the fullness of our humanity, learning the whole language of the gods. It's all here. It's all here. So I hope, I doubt that I really answered your question, but I brought some more about the archetypes in. And yeah. Anybody else?
Yes, thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Thanks, Jacqueline. So, all right, so unless there's some more questions, I think we can say goodbye. And I'm so grateful for this. And I'm so surprised that we didn't have more people. But whoever came, and the recording will be available. So I'm sure Mercury is in retrograde, so I'm sure it's a Mercury thing. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Goodbye. Mwah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
All right, bye-bye.